Hey, my pottery posse. I hope you're doing great today because we're going to be making a Christmas tree. Yay, Christmas! My name's Emily Edens, also known as the Potter Eden. If you can't tell, I kind of love Christmas. I mean, I'm already decorated. And it's only the week after Thanksgiving. Okay, it's the 5th day after Thanksgiving. If you're a beginner thrower and you haven't acquainted yourself with your wheel, this is a great lesson to do that with because we're going to be making some basic cylinders and turning them into Christmas trees. I'm excited. I hope you're excited. Let's get into this. First, let's get out our clay and wedge. Now, I'm using reclaimed clay for this project, and this particular reclaim is left over from throwing for the past 2 months, so it's only one type of clay. That's why it's so wet. So I'm going to have to wedge it quite a bit more than normal in order to work out all that excess water and air. Just a tip, it's easier to throw with slightly more plastic or malleable clay than more dried out clay. Next, I'm going to weigh out my clay into about half-pound chunks, and let's get on the wheel. I'm going to clean off my bat so that my clay really sticks to the wheel and doesn't fly off while I'm throwing. Trust me, it's happened before. Now this is where throwing gets its name. The first step is to throw that chunk of clay down onto the center of the bat. If it's not perfectly centered, slide it as close as you can and then spin the wheel and slap the clay to bring it into a bit more even of a lump. Now wet your clay and get into position. Now the proper position to have is to sit as close as you can to the wheel, really straddling it, and dig your elbows into your hip bones so you are really anchored and steady yourself. With your wheel turning counterclockwise as fast as it will go and your hands wet, place the side of your left hand firmly against the bat and the butt of it against the clay, pushing away from you using the weight of your body. In your right hand, hold a half-full sponge and place the side of that hand on top, gently pushing downward. Now let me show you what happens when your elbows are not anchored in your hips, but merely just resting on your legs. You will throw it out of center every time. Get anchored back into your hips and you'll get back to center in a snap. Now let's do something called wheel wedging. Now before I started doing this, all my pieces were just slightly off center or wobbly, or the rims would be uneven. This step is so easy to do once you get the hang of it, and it will do wonders for your pieces. Use your left hand to push out against the clay and your right hand and sponge to compress the clay to bring it up. Then re-wet the clay and compress it back down. I normally do this about 3 to 4 times before rounding out the dome and making the well. Something important to remember is that every time you put your hands on or take them off of the clay, go slowly. This is what happens when you go fast. Just slowly place your hands back on the form while anchored and you will easily bring it back. Now bring it back to a dome and let's make the well. The well is the first step in making a vessel, but since this is going to be a cone, we're going to actually push all the way down to the bat. I like to put a sponge that's mostly full and place it on top of one of my hands that is angled at 45 degrees with the pad of my finger at the center. Then place the other hand directly on top so that when you're pressing directly down to make that well, you can squeeze your hands together and re-wet the clay when it dries out and not have to remove your hands. Now, normally we want to reserve about 1/2 inch base at the bottom for making mistakes or for trimming that foot. But this time we are making a cone, so we're gonna go all the way down to the bat. To widen the base, press against the bat and pull your straightened fingers toward yourself. We're aiming for about a 2.5 inch opening. Before we make the pull, make sure that the walls are nice and straight and rounded on the top. Now it's time to make a pull, and hand position is very important. When making a pull, your fingers should be at the exact same place on the inside and the outside of the walls as you pull up. You want your middle finger on the inside with the rest of your fingers, and your pointer finger will actually rest on the outside hand, which is my right hand. I am going to use up my sponge on the outside hand, supporting it, but with the pad of my middle finger doing all the work. And to match it, on the inside, I'll be using my left middle finger. When you place your hands onto the clay, make sure that your wheel is spinning at about a third of its fastest speed. We're gonna go this speed for the rest of the time we throw. If you go too fast, you'll end up with uneven pulls. Begin by squeezing water over the form so that the inside and outside in its entirety are wet. Then, placing your fingers all the way down, press firmly against the bat, pressing your fingers together with firm fingers and a light inward compression. Begin moving up at a pace where your fingers make registers. Moving slowly upward, the clay should rotate through your fingers one time around, and by that time, your fingers should be beginning the next rotation. If you move too quickly, your walls will be uneven, and too slowly, your walls will be too thin. The appropriate amount of pulls for this amount of clay would be about 4 to 5, but just aim to get your walls to about 1/4 of an inch thick. Now, as you pull, you need to be bringing the clay directly upward. However, in order to do this, your body should feel like you're pulling inward toward the center of your bat. Since this is going to be a tree, we need this form to be a cone. So we're going to pull more toward the center than usual. To do this, place more pressure from your outward hand than your inward hand and drag your hands along the invisible line that you're aiming for, that cone shape. Make sure to follow through all the way from the bottom and past the rim. Now that we're finished making our pulls, we need to close off the top using a method called choking. Love the fact that it works, but I hate the name. Thoroughly wet your hands and make sure that the clay is wet as well. Cup your hands gently around the form and begin applying pressure inward. Go slowly or the clay will start to wrinkle in on itself. Take a few times to get this form closed off. Make 1 or 2 light passes with your sponge or metal rib to make the exterior texture how you like it, and let's cut it from the bat. Grab your wire cutters and wrap them around your fingers and hands so that when you pull it tight, it's just slightly bigger than the base of your form. Pull the wire taut and firmly press the wire under your pointer fingers or thumbs and slide it across. Use the bat detaching tool to release the bat from the wheel and set it aside to dry to leather hard. Once it's reached that state, we're going to cut it once again using the same method with our wire cutters. And this time we're going to release it from the bat and let it dry on a different surface. I like to let mine dry on a wood surface so that it has equal opportunity on all sides to dry out. Now grab your scissors. This is going to be the fun part. We are actually going to make little incisions using our scissors to create those little tree limbs. Do this all the way around, making those cuts in between each other cut so it offsets your limbs. Then use a wooden knife tool to lift each point. Now for the star, I'm just going to take this ball of clay, flatten it, and pinch each of the 5 points. Score it, slip it, and attach. Now for our second tree, I'm going to use these nice little hole pokers, and I'm going to poke, 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 poke. I'm doing this in kind of a random pattern, and it's hopefully going to look like lights whenever I put a tea light inside. Okay, so ignore the fact that I have like no makeup on and the garbage man is going down the street right now. So I'm doing something a little illegal. Last time I did this was with Granny Rochester. If you haven't seen that, go look it up. But I'm putting glaze on an unfired piece of pottery and then throwing it through a glaze firing. Every time that I have done this, it's worked out just fine, but that is mostly because I've put it through a bisque temperature, which is normally like 0405, and just done a low fire glaze on it. But this time, I decided that I was going to go with a high fire glaze. I don't even know what to call this. It's not quite stupid, but I wanted to be experimental. So we're gonna see how this turns out. If it explodes, oh well, it's on its own shelf. We'll see. But it's not even dry yet. So check it out.
Here it is. Yeah.
Okay, so here's the other one. I just finished glazing it. I glazed the inside too because I want it to be super shiny. This is Amico Palladium, so it's gonna end up being very like metallic-y, so I'm hoping this works out. I mean, seriously. So basically what I plan on doing is just an extremely slow firing, and it's gonna be a cone 5 firing. And I'm probably gonna let this be like a 10 or even 12-hour firing, and we'll see how it goes.
One eternity later.
Okay, y'all, it's super early in the morning, but they didn't break! Oh my gosh, I'm so excited!